Okay, so we are going to learn how to trim a foot on your project today. So here's an example. So it's this raised portion. So we're taking some of the thickness and we're cutting away. This is also going to be our opportunity to shape the bottom. Remember how I didn't like the bottom of my ramekins, and I said that's okay, we'll shape them. Here's another one. So you can see they're slightly different. You might look on Pinterest or on Google and just ceramic foot, I think is what I would maybe go Pinterest rather than Google. I think you'll get better results. They're all different. I mean, you can make your foot really deep. Actually, this part's the foot, but you can carve the middle part pretty deep to make a very pronounced foot. You can do just kind of, you know, like this. So lots of different ways to do it. I'm gonna show you two different that are just slightly different. And then you'll have this video if you need to look back as you're doing it. So I cut through these and then I have kind of left them out off and on, but I have not moved them from the bats. All I've done is cut through that one time after I finished them. So it'll still kind of be stuck, even though my clay is leather hard. When you cut through, you're essentially just making the path, but since the clay is so sticky at that point still, it kind of reattaches a little bit. But if you haven't done that initial cut through, it's really hard to cut through leather hard clay and you're gonna mess it up. So that's why we did the initial cut through, even though it kind of restuck. So I'm gonna use my path and I'm gonna cut through again. It might be a little bit difficult, but because you have that path, you should be able to get through. And we really don't want to move until we're leather hard. So you should be able to pick it up and it's not like flopping all over the place. You should be, it should hold its own. You guys know what leather hard is. And I'm actually going to remove my bat because the lines on the wheel can actually help us. We essentially have to recenter this so that when we go to cut our foot is actually in the middle. So you can use the lines on here to kind of help you do that. So we're gonna try to recenter this. This is the way that I learned how to do it in college and the way that I think it's easiest to do it. If you watch videos on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever, they do the tap method where they have their wheel going pretty slow and they like tap it into center. I have never been able to do it that way, so I don't do it that way. If you watch a video and you can figure out how to tap into center, by all means, go for it. I just have never really been able to do it. And so this is the way that my college professor taught me. So I'm gonna try to get it as centered as possible. And then we wanna be really careful at this stage. Your clay is leather hard, so it's lost some of its stickiness. If you put your wheel full speed, it's gonna fly. And then you're gonna have another ramekin to make. So slow and steady wins the race when we're trying to recenter. So what I'm gonna do, I always take a sponge and just hold it in place and kind of just clean up. Just go over it, make sure it's looking really smooth and the outer edge doesn't have any kind of like extra stuff. And then I'm gonna make the wheel go slow. And I'm just gonna take my needle tool. I don't wanna dig in very deep, so I'm gonna kind of keep it sideways. And I'm just holding it super still and letting a circle appear, okay? So what are we looking for? We're looking for equal space all the way around the outside of the circle, okay? I actually did a fairly good job of centering it. I wanna show you if I'm gonna actually move it. So I actually did a fairly good job, but let's say we're here, okay. And you can tell when it, like, you know that that's not centered, right? So if I do my circle now, okay, so we're looking for space. There's a lot more space over here than there is over here, right? So we need to push in the direction that there's the least amount of space. So we're gonna take where there's most amount and least amount, and we're just gonna really carefully, it doesn't even look like I moved it because we're not talking a huge amount of space. So I just kind of moved it a little bit. I'm gonna hold it so that I don't move it as I get rid of that line. That's why you don't want this line to be very deep. and then I'm gonna go again. So then the goal is to get equal space all around, and once you do, you should be fairly centered. Okay, least amount of space is right here. I'm gonna pull it towards me. Or, you know, you're pushing it in the direction where there's the least amount of space. Okay, this might take a minute, but you want it to be centered, otherwise you'll have a foot that looks really funky. Okay, so we're obviously getting closer, but do you guys, can you tell I need to go that way a little bit? Mm-hmm. Okay. And at this point, it's like millimeters. Maybe not even that. And at some point, it might just be that where you cut it off is a little bit wonky. And if that's the case, as long as you have just about the same amount of space all the way around, we should be able to still make it work. But it should generally look pretty centered as it's spinning. So I think this is probably, man, I'm not on my game today, guys. Okay. Should have just left it that first time. Dang it, you guys. Okay. And then once I get it, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of spare clay. We're gonna make sure that it doesn't fly once we get it going, so that we can make it go a little bit faster. All right, can we all agree that's pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm gonna grab a little bit of clay. I would maybe turn the wheel off just so you don't accidentally bump at this stage. Doesn't matter what color it is. We just want it to be fairly soft. I'm gonna get 3 little pieces. If you watch videos, sometimes they'll do like coils of clay around the bottom. And we're gonna place them so that this holds my ramekin in place. So I'm gonna place them, but not push them in yet. If I push that one, it's gonna push my ramekin. So I'm gonna kind of just push down on it just a little bit so it won't move. And then you wanna pretty firmly push down your clay so that it holds your ramekin in place. So then we can go a little bit faster as we trim, and it's fine. So we're not actually worried about the foot quite yet. We first wanna make sure, I turned my wheel off. We first want to make sure that we like the bottom of our ramekin. And I already talked about how I didn't like the bottom, so address that first. You've got your ribbon tool, okay, that's already at your wheel. But then, those 2 drawers that are open, your cabinet drawers covering one of them, but those 2 bottom drawers have all sorts of different sized ribbon tools, okay? These are the smallest ones. If you're trimming something larger, there are huge ones, and then these are also trimming tools. So those 2 drawers have all different trimming tools. You guys are more than welcome to any of them. If you bring them over here though, make sure that they get back in those drawers when you're done. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of just show you what some of them do. For the outer edge, it's just kind of like I trimmed my vase, my 2-part vase. You just wanna trim away, and I would also kind of note before you put this upside down how much thickness you have. I know that I have a ton of thickness right here, so I have a little bit of clay to work with. The last thing that you want to do is trim the bottom off, because then you'll have a donut. We need a ramekin. So I know that I have quite a bit of thickness here, so I can kind of shape it how I want. Now, you want the snakes. So the snakes that are coming off, that's good. Okay, we need it to be leather hard. If your clay is too soft, essentially you'll shave it off, but then it'll reattach because your clay is sticky. So if your snakes are not coming off like that, if they're reattaching to your ramekin, you're not quite hard enough yet. You can heat gun it. we really don't want it past leather hard either. I can kind of help you guys manage past leather hard. We can kind of re-wet it enough that it works. But leather hard where the snakes are coming off is really optimal. Okay, so I'm just shaving away until I like what this shape looks like. So you can kind of decide. And you can shave down into the bowl too. Again, just make sure that you actually have that thickness. Okay, so I think that looks much nicer. Agreed. Okay, so I kind of got rid of that weird foot thing that was going on. So once you like it, I always like to go over my work with a sponge just to kind of make sure it's where I want it to be. Okay. And now I am ready to actually cut my foot. So 2 feet that I'm gonna show you, one of them is gonna be a more pronounced foot than the other. So this one, I'm gonna take this ribbon tool and I'm essentially gonna cut in a little bit. It's gonna be more like this one. So it's got this little shelf and then the foot, okay? This one kind of does the same thing. So I'm going to take this tool. You want to make sure that you're super steady. Okay, so stay really steady, and I'm essentially using the right angle to cut in. Okay, and I'm just gonna make like a little shelf. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back and smooth that out. So it kind of just makes a more pronounced foot, so then I can go through with my sponge. And smooth it out. I could even kind of get rid of that angle so that it just looks like it's part of my bowl. Okay, you do want to stay really steady, because if you jump in any way, you're going to cut into what needs to be your foot. Okay, so then what I need to do, once I get that how I want it, I need to decide how big I actually want my foot to be, how wide. So I'm going to go back to the needle tool and I'm going to decide how wide. So that's going to tell me where I'm going to start cutting. Obviously we need a foot, you need that raised portion. So kind of decide how wide you want it to be. So you can kind of see that one's really narrow, and you have to be careful, because if you slip, you're gonna cut your foot off. So just be careful, okay? So I'm actually gonna start in with this little one to kind of start getting my little moat, okay? Again, really steady. And I'm just gonna start my moat so that I kind of know where to stop. And then you can switch to a different one. The biggest thing is that you never want to go past center, because if you think about it, if you go past center, the wheel is coming towards you and you're gonna gouge it. So whatever you do, you just don't wanna choose, like if I chose this one to shave away, I'm going past center and it's gonna be a disaster. So just make sure whichever tool you choose, you're not going past the center. And then I'm just gonna hold this flat and kind of start going in and out, and I'm just shaving off these thin layers. Again, it's really important that you know how much thickness you have, because what can happen, this circle can just flop in. So be careful, make sure you know how much thickness you have to work with. And just take off thin layers at a time. Okay, once you feel like you're good, you've got the foot that you want. Okay, so the thing that you need to think about, you should be able to glaze this middle part without it touching the kiln. So you need to at least cut it deep enough that you could glaze it and it wouldn't stick to the kiln. Sometimes I take my pinky along that edge, make sure that it's really nice and pronounced. Just do one quick smooth over. And you've got a trimmed ramekin with a nice little foot, okay? Don't unattach until you know it's good. Look at it from all angles. Do you love it? Is there anything that you want to change? Once you take these off, it is nearly impossible to get it back to where it is. So just make sure that you love it. You want to do nothing more to it, okay? And then sometimes what happens when you push in, sometimes it alters the lip a little bit. So check your lip. Make sure your lip's good. Make sure that you put your signature or your stamp or whatever you're doing, and then you should be good to go. When you're going to move on to the second one, you can use your calipers to measure as long as it's close. Again, I'm not going to put it under a microscope, but you want them to be close. So just kind of look at them, okay? I'm going to do the second one really quick. Okay, so then this one, I'm just going to show you a slightly different foot, and then you can, thank you.
You're welcome.
You can go online, and if you find one that you like and you're not quite sure how to achieve it, just let me know. Okay, and I can help you out. Okay, let's hope that this goes like that. First one. But again, use the circles on your wheel. That helps a lot. Okay. And smooth it over a little bit. Just to make sure you have like an accurate. Okay. I would want your feet to all be the same. It helps if I turn on the wheel. Okay, guys, this is gonna go way better.
Ooh, yes.
Yes. Okay. I know you were all like, oh gosh, how long is this gonna take? Okay, so I'm gonna hold it, push them in, make sure that they're attached to the wheel head pretty well, and then ready to go. Again, I'm gonna start by just trimming the side. Use whatever tool you like best. These tools, I actually don't really like these tools, but they're really sharp and they're just gonna shave away. I don't love them, but some people do. They are nice. It gets like a really nice smooth edge for when you're trimming out the foot. I just really like to use ribbon tools, so that's what I usually stick to. So on this one, my foot is gonna be like on this one. Do you see how when it's sitting like this, if you're looking at it, you can see my foot? On this one, it's not gonna look like it has a foot until we flip it over. So it's more of like a secret agent foot. Okay, so I'm gonna get that ugly thing that was going on to go away. So those, isn't this so satisfying? So we want the snakes. Okay, much better. Okay, take a sponge over it. So then rather than doing that little indent, I'm gonna go straight for the foot. Straight for the jugular. So I'm just gonna go ahead and decide, there it is. I'm gonna decide how wide I want my foot to be. So I'm not doing anything else on this edge. I'm deciding how big I want my foot to be, how wide. And then I'm gonna just go ahead and start cutting in. So I'm gonna start that little moat. A little bit more narrow this time, but it doesn't have to be. So then again, if you want to use these, the only nice thing about the only thing I think is nice about these, it does give you a really sharp edge so that your foot is really nice and pronounced right where you start cutting away. So it will be a really nice right angle where your foot is. So that is a nice thing, but they are really sharp, so like one wrong move and like you might just gouge your entire project. So I stick to the ribbon tools. Do be careful If you're using them like this, make sure that you don't dip into your foot, okay? So keep them raised enough. And again, just don't go past center. And just be careful every time you're getting close to where your foot is so that you don't trim it away. Okay, I've cut in enough that I could glaze that middle section. I'm gonna take my finger, take my sponge. So you don't really need a whole lot of water when you're trimming. And then if you feel like it's not super flat, you can even just really gently trim to make sure that it's gonna sit really flat there. Cut out a little bit more. And then you've got a super professional looking ramekin. Did any of you go home and look at your dishes? Or have you noticed your dishes? Do they all have feet? They do, I promise. Or like if you're if you're at a store, just flip it over. So, looks good. Don't flip it, don't take it away until you know that it's how you want it. And then that foot, whenever it's sitting, you can't see it until you flip it over. Okay? Okay. So these are not the only, you can go ahead. These are not the only